What's up, big dog? I'm Promise Israel, and this is my very first podcasting episode where we talk about everything. But today we're going to talk about honoring your parents even when it's hard. I remember a time in my life where I was just like super lost, super negative. My heart posture was bad, my attitude was bad, how I looked at life was just bad. I was angry. I know this topic can be very uncomfortable, and this is something that I also wrestled with growing into being an adult. And still, as an adult, you have to remember to honor your parents even when it's hard. But honestly, what really helped me was just getting closer to God and just also wanting to truly heal. A lot of times, we think that we're healing as adult children. As adults, you're probably not really healing, big dog. You got to get real with yourself. So this topic is really going to be, so let's just dive in. Honoring your parents is super easy when the relationship is good. But the key word is relationship. So just like any relationship, a lot of time we think about romantic relationships, right? Any relationship takes work. You're going to have a season where it's not going to be good. You're going to have a season where it might be some trauma involved. You're going to have a season where it's going to be super good, where the money good, where the job good, where the relationship good, the communication is good. But then it's going to be so many more seasons that you're going to have. And if you go into this situation just being delusional, what is delusional? Thinking that every day is going to be a great day. You're going to really struggle with maintaining a healthy relationship with your parents, and parents maintaining a healthy relationship with your adult children. Now, for me, I'm all about accountability. So I believe it takes two to tango. What does that mean? Both parties have to be open and willing to get on the same page. If you're not willing to get on the same page with your daddy, if your mama or your daddy not willing to get on the same page with you, or at least get to a point where it's not so much, and it's more like somebody's listening, somebody's talking, then take a pause, digest that, then somebody talks, somebody listen. Y'all got to get more along the lines of that. I know a lot of y'all don't want to hear this, but in the Bible it say honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land that God is giving you. Like, did you notice that it's like a promise attached to that commandment? So honoring your parents is not just about your parents. It's also about you. If you want to live long, and y'all got to understand what living is. Just because you're getting older, it's a lot of dead people walking. They're getting older, right? They're still living, but they're bitter, they're depressed, they're dark. Do you think that's truly life? It's not. So when it says so that you may live long in the land that your Lord God is giving you, God has something really special for you. You have to believe that, right? So if you don't honor your father and your mother, how can you live long? Longevity, prosperity, abundance. God don't want to see us struggling. A lot of times we're in a state of struggle because we're not being obedient to him. We're not following his commandments. So I don't care if you like your parents. I don't care really what happened between you and your parents, because I'm not here to judge. I'm also not a therapist or a counselor. I'm just here to let you know a lot of times you really just got to trust the process. You have those parents for a reason. And I know you might be looking at everybody else's situation thinking to yourself, well, why is my mom not that like that? Why is my dad not like that? And I'm kind of talking in between being a child and also being an adult child, because I'm now an adult child and I've been a child. So it's easy to look at folks' family, other folks' situations, other folks' relationships with their parents and start thinking weird about yours. Really trust the process. God did not make any mistakes when he allowed your mother to be your mother and your father to be your father. He's not making any mistakes, although you might be going through, or you might have gone through traumatic experiences and stuff and trauma, all of that. But he's still not making any mistakes. And I know that might be hard to hear, because when you think of God, you think of, y'all think of him in an unrealistic way. God is the creator of good and evil. That does not mean that your life is going to be a walk in the park. His son Jesus' life was not a walk in the park. Jesus could have been born in a palace. He could have had a super great upbringing with money and abundance and all of that. He could have. But God knows it's more people in the world as middle class, low class that really don't have that privilege. But you can have that privilege. You could be the one to break so many chains off of your family, and it could really start with just honoring your mother and your father. But if you don't ever think about how important it is to honor the position, to honor the vessel that brought you here, vessels, then you will be playing a catch-up game for the rest of your life. You know what I'm saying? So what does honor really mean? When I think about honor right now with my adult brain, I think about balance and I think about respect. When I think about honor, or if you're a child watching this, still staying in your mama's house under the age of 18 or age of 21, I'm not sure. When you think about honor, you should think about obedience. And now balance and boundaries and all of that stuff should play a part in honor. But when you're a kid, you really under the leadership of someone else. So if you're not able to get out of a certain environment due to not having resources and stuff like that. Now, I'm not talking about children who might be in a situation where they're being assaulted or taken advantage of. Moral is going on. Some people are just brought up in situations that are poor, like poverty. Certain environments that are very just low vibrational, and that's okay. You don't always have to be there. While you're in these situations, you really need to make the best of it, and money is not the problem. If your parents had more money, would you respect them or honor them more? Stop acting like you don't respect your parents and you don't honor your parents based off of what you have, what you can see. You're supposed to honor and respect your parents just based off the fact that that's just what you're supposed to do. So when I think about it as an adult, and adult children, y'all really need to listen to this. You got to have balance and you also got to have respect. What does that mean? If you're not staying under your parents' roof, balance is knowing how to draw the line. Now we're setting boundaries because it was some stuff that you probably dealt with when you was a kid that you really didn't like. It's going to be situations that you're not going to like everything that's going on around you. That's why when you have the opportunity to grow up and when you have the opportunity to leave and cleave and get out on your own, now we start establishing boundaries. But how do we respectfully establish boundaries? You got to use your voice. You got to communicate. You got to start letting your parents know, hey, mom, I don't like that. Dad, I don't like that. Hey, don't say that to me. Hey, just start. You got to get used to saying no. And that's not just a 2-letter word. No is, I don't like that. Don't do that to me. Don't show up to my house unannounced. Don't do, you know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of different ways where you set boundaries where you're telling the person, no, this part of my life is off limits. And parents, you need to be ready to receive that. When your kids get over that threshold of being in your house and being under your leadership and spending your money, you got to be ready to really respect that person as an adult. And respect does go both ways. So if both parties could remember this one thing, we learned this when we was kids. Everybody has heard this before. Treat people how you want to be treated. So if you are a parent who now has an adult kid, you need to think about how would you want to be treated in this instance. If you're an adult kid with a parent, how would you want to be treated in this instance? How would you want your adult kid or your kid to say this to you if you was in your parents' shoes? So it's a whole lot of stuff that comes into play. Empathy, sympathy, grace, mercy, boundaries. Having the posture of being obedient enough to also put yourself in a situation that makes you a little uncomfortable. I remember the first time I started setting boundaries with my parents, it was very uncomfortable. Why? Well, because it's not something that you're necessarily taught to do. You just wake up one morning and you realize, I don't like how this feels. And if I keep allowing this to happen, it could be something as simple as a certain topic that you probably just don't want to talk about no more. You probably over that. You probably ain't even friends with those people. You probably don't fool with those family members no more. So you don't really want to hear nothing about them. As simple as that might sound, that's not easy to really say to your parents, because now you got to put on your big girl pants, put on your big boy pants, and really say something to your parents so that they can know, hey, I'm no longer in that season and I don't want to talk about that no more. I ain't thinking about that no more. Right? Adult kids, be ready for your parents not to be prepared to hear no. Be ready for your parents to be thrown off by you actually saying something to put them in a place. Because when you do become an adult, it's a place for everything. Your parents should not trump everything in your life anymore when you become an adult. Being obedient also has a lot to do with honoring. And the first person you got to be obedient to is Jesus, is God. He put that commandment in place that says, honor your father and mother. And then he also attached a promise to it. So if you really want to see if do what he say he go do, you got to respect and be obedient to what he's telling you to do. Okay? 9 times out of 10, a person who is estranged from their parents I could guarantee you they don't have a good relationship with God. Now, like I said, certain instances are different. You got to use this information and apply this information to your life. But I remember when I wasn't talking to my parents, right? I also wasn't talking to God. I did not have a relationship with God when I didn't have a relationship with my parents. The minute I started back having a relationship with God, my relationships with my parents started to get restored. Why? God is our Father, okay? He is the reason that we exist. Who else is the reason that you exist? Your mother and your father. So it's like, y'all gotta look at it, not necessarily on the same playing field, but kind of under the same umbrella. You have to be obedient to God. He's your father. He's your overseer, as well as your parents. And then when you get married, your husband, he's the head. So you gotta really respect the chain of command because it's in place for a reason. If parents and their position wasn't important, we wouldn't have them. We'll just be born into the world. I don't really know how to explain that, but if having a parent wasn't super, if having a parent wasn't, come on, if having a parent wasn't super important, it wouldn't exist. So y'all gotta understand that this stuff exists because it's a place for it. And let's move on. So I remember when I was struggling with the honor your father and mother commandment. And some of the questions I would ask myself is, how do I honor a person who has hurt me? Right? And adult kids, y'all gotta really sit down with yourself. What hurt you? Take out a journal. Start writing this stuff down. Start peeling back the onion to really see, are you really hurt or are you tripping? Ooh, that's better. Are you really hurt or are you tripping? And when I really started writing down things that I thought hurt me, I'm not going to say everything I wrote down, I discovered that I was tripping because I wasn't. Parents do have the ability to hurt you, just like children have the ability to hurt parents. So both parties are in a position where they can be disappointed at one another, angry at one another, happy towards one another. Those emotions can go both ways. And we have to stop dehumanizing one another. Your kids gonna make mistakes. Boom, we get it. Your parents are also gonna make mistakes. That goes both ways. A lot of times as the adult kid or a kid who's a kid still in their parents' house, but you're operating mentally, you think you grown, but nothing around you screams, I'm grown. This can apply to anybody. Stop dehumanizing your parents. You don't even know. A lot of times we judge a choice that our parents made when we really don't know what options they had. And when I really sat with that, right, when me and my mama was going through therapy, it's some stuff she said to me that really, it made me look at life a different way. She basically said, you don't know what I had to choose from. You really don't know. You really don't know, promise. And when you think about it, we don't know our moms when they had us. We don't know our moms when they was dating or when they got pregnant, or we don't know how that pregnancy was. We don't know. It's a lot of, even with your fathers, whoever, both parents, you really don't know what they had to choose from. So if you're not willing to just really ponder on, well, my mama made this choice, it had to be the best choice. You got to just apply it how you need to apply it. Now, some parents are bad parents. But a lot of parents really did not have the choices that you think they had. And it's easy to look at your parents and say all the things you would have did, but you really don't know what they had to choose from. And parents, those kids grown now. Be real with them. Let them know what you had to choose from. You can't be afraid to be judged either. I think that we're all human, and transparency is the best healer. Be transparent, be open, be honest. If you know your kid got beef with you, or get some information that can kind of ease the tension in this area of y'all life, or in this area of the relationship between your parents, between your adult kids, why are you withholding that information? You know what I'm saying? Go ahead and let your kids know, hey, this is what I had to choose from. And based on where I was standing from, this is what I thought was best. And parents, stop being hard on yourself. If you know that was the best choice, and you really don't know if it's the best choice until you make a choice. And I commend a lot of parents because, for example, my mom, I'm sure it's a lot of times she chose something that probably was strange to everybody around her, but I love my mom enough and I trust my mom enough to really believe that she was trying to have everybody's best interest in the forefront of her choosing. And I'm done condemning my mama for having agape love. One thing I learned about my mom, she has agape love. She thinks about everyone when she's making a decision. Now, I'm not promoting that, but I'm just saying you got to be a selfless individual to make a decision and totally take yourself out of it and really think about how it can impact everyone else. Now, that also can put you in a stagnant place as a parent, as an adult, as just a human without kids. It could put you in a stagnant place because the choice that you probably should have made was just to make sure you and your kids were straight. But when you got a big heart, or when you from an environment that promotes, let's try to help everybody, which I'm from an environment that promotes that. And as I got older, I realized it's kind of like a trick of the devil. The devil will have you thinking that you're doing right by doing for others, when in fact, if you don't have boundaries, of course, the decisions that you make are going to be detrimental to your immediate family, which is yourself and your children, right? But the enemy will have you feeling like it's okay to pour from an empty cup. And I'm telling you, parents, a lot of times your children, they've grown up to resent you because they seen you pour from an empty cup. We don't have enough to give away right now. So mama, say no. Daddy, say no. So we can be straight. And just a small testimonial, I saw my mama really pour from an empty cup my whole entire life. And it did make me have some resentment towards her. But when I look at it, my mama, she was genuinely a good person. She was really trying to, I'm saying, she wanted everybody to feel some sort of happiness, some sort of love. And at the end, it backfired on her with her own kids. That's her story to tell. But I'm just telling y'all, parents, sometimes your kids are resenting you because they haven't seen you set any boundaries. And when your children don't see you set boundaries, they grow up and they struggle with setting boundaries. What is that called? That's a generational curse. All right. I struggled with setting boundaries. I struggled with saying no. I struggled with putting my hand closed in certain moments where I only have enough for me right now. But I went through that season of being just like my mama, giving, pouring from an empty cup. And then I looked up one day, 25, 26, and I'm pissed off because I should have more. I should be a little bit further than I am, but I've given everything away. I've done exactly what I said I didn't want to do, which was, let's be real. A lot of times you hear people say, I'm not going to be like my mama. I'm not going to be like my daddy. And then you grow up and do the same thing they did. So what that mean? You just like them. I grew up giving all my stuff away, not really having any attachment to things that I spent my money on. I just looked at it like, oh, it's just stuff. Don't worry about that. You can replace stuff, and you can. But I was thinking like that from an unhealthy place. So when you grow up as an adult kid, get into some therapy and be real with the therapist. My therapist told me off rip, you are a people pleaser. I had already felt like that though, because you can know your flaws, right? But you're in an environment that normalizes people pleasing. You don't know that you're a people pleaser. You think that you're really being a good person. But not being able to say no, not being able to set boundaries, all of that stuff, it come at a cost. And a lot of times the cost could be between you and your kids, you and your adult kids. Now, the truth is, the real problem is a lot of times we mistake honor with obedience. Here's the truth. Honor is about heart posture. Obedience is involved, but honor is about heart posture. It's about your heart. You can have boundaries and still honor a person. You don't just have to be, and this goes for both parties, you don't just have to be dumping ground for anyone. Set boundaries. In Colossians, and I think it's like in the 3rd chapter, it says something about children obey your parents. It says children obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. But the key word is children, right? The key word is children. When you become an adult, that obey, that obedience, it needs to shift into respect and care. But the honor remains the same. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Children, yes, obey your parents. When you're under their roof, you should just obey your parents. Why are you being combative with your parents? They're taking care of you. They're providing for you. They're protecting for you. What is provision? What does that mean? What does providing for your children mean? That means they're meeting your basic needs, kids. You have something to eat. You have clothes on your back. It might not be what you want, but this is what they're giving you. You're going to have your opportunity to have what you want when you grow up and leave and cleave and get your own money or whatever. I'm trying to talk in a general way, but at the same time, listen, Jesus meets our basic needs: food, shelter, health. Parents' basic needs: food, shelter, and everything that falls under that umbrella. And a lot of times y'all kind of being delusional, not thinking that I need to be obedient to my mom, obedient to my dad because they're taking care of me. So what's the solution to all of this? How do we honor our parents when times are tough, when times are hard? Number one, like I said previously, you need to acknowledge that they're human. It might be some stuff that they've done that you don't like. They probably made some mistakes. They're human. They may have failed you to a certain extent, but you gotta remember they're not perfect. Only God is perfect. And trust the process, man. Really get grounded in God, because a lot of the stuff you think is just so bad in your life is really, all things are working for my good. All things. Not just all good things. Not just all things. Not all ugly things. Not all things that feel like love. Not all things that feel good. All things. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent. All things are working for my good. So you gotta just acknowledge that they're human. Adult kids, your parents, of course they didn't get it right. You're not finna get it right either. Not totally. But you can start to kind of cultivate and restructure the family dynamic by starting to honor your parents today. Doesn't matter how old or how young you are, just start today. Ask God to restore that relationship today. And when you ask God, you need to be ready to get out in the field and do the field work. Asking God for something and still doing the same thing you've been doing, which is not addressing certain issues, not putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation so that it can be restored. Restoration comes through being uncomfortable. And another thing that we can do, start speaking good things about your parents. It's easy. Jesus Christ, it's easy to remember bad things. We were born into sin. Our nature is sin. Our nature is bad. Just to give y'all a quick example, people think that good people, nice people, respectful people, people who turn the other cheek and handle hostile situations in just a caring way, they think that's easy. No, it's easy to be negative. It's easy to be disobedient. It's easy to be disrespectful. It's easy to be rebellious. Those are easy things. Why? We're born into that. Our nature is that. So if you could start speaking, y'all got to remember in Proverbs, it reminds us that the power of life and death is in the tongue. So I remember when I had to, man, you got to start speaking life over your situation with your mama and with your daddy. Parents, y'all got to start speaking life over the situations with your estranged kids, your angry kids, your depressed kids. What does that look like? Try to find the good in them. Kids ain't doing right, still try to speak life into the situation. Don't be delusional though. This doesn't mean act as if that person is on the right track. Sometimes we get this mixed up. We mix up speaking life. We mix it up with being delusional. You still gotta have, agape love is tough love. If you know somebody should be doing better, if you know somebody is wrong, you gotta speak against that. You can't just enable, and a lot of times, parents, I hate to break it to y'all be enabling y'all kids at such a young age by just overlooking small flaws that are going to grow into bigger flaws. And I know y'all don't want to hear that, and y'all especially don't want to hear it from me. Why? Because I don't have no kids, and y'all feel like, oh, she don't know what she's talking about. But I do. I see it happen every day. I see people every day try to blame what their child is doing on either someone else or either on the fact that that's a child. If your child doing something inappropriate, if your child being disrespectful, if your child is doing something weird, what do you mean? Oh, he's just a kid. No, it's a kid that's going to turn into an adult. And that's going to be a problem that you're going to have to handle. And it's going to be so out of hand because they're going to continue to grow. And they're going to grow up and have a man body, a woman body, but still be acting like a kid because their parents didn't speak against stuff they needed to be spoken against. So you still can't spare the rod as a parent. You cannot spare the rod. You need to discipline your children. So like I said, the power of where that relationship is going to go is in the tongue. You speak ill about your parents 9 times out of 10, you go keep feeling that way. If you start speaking life just into your subconscious mind, I love my mama. I love my daddy. I can't wait till stuff get better. I know they didn't mean that. I know. And then parents, vice versa. I love my kid. I can't wait till they come back home. I can't wait. Just start getting that in your subconscious. Don't lose hope. I remember one time the enemy had almost robbed me of the hope that I had about the relationship being restored with my mom and my dad. I had almost given up. I remember I called the therapist and I was like, hey, man, this ain't working out. So I'm not finna bring this into another year. This was the end of December. We was moving into another year. And I said, man, I'm not finna spend no more time on this. It ain't working. That was the enemy about to rob me from the hope that I was about, rob me from the relationship that God was right. And God was, imagine if I had allowed myself to dwell in that thought. When I talked to the therapist, in my spirit, something told me to write a letter to my mama. And in the letter, my plan was to let her know, hey, this just ain't working out. I hate that it got to be this way, but I need to move on with my life. As I started to write, the words that was coming out on the paper was totally different from what I'm thinking that I was going to write, which means in my subconscious mind, I had love for my mama. But your subconscious mind, you got to dig deep into it. You really got to sit with yourself. My surface mind was thinking the therapy ain't working. So as I'm writing down nothing but good things. I start crying, right? I feel in my spirit, call your mama. Typically when I call, we playing phone tag and she answered. But my cardinal brain was like, man, I hope she don't answer because I'm crying. And a lot of times as adults, I'm just say this, as adults, we don't want to put our pride aside. I don't want my mama to hear me crying. I don't want to say this stuff to my mama because I'm operating out of pride, right? But then I had to die to my flesh. It was so many lessons I learned in this one situation. Pride is of the flesh, but dying to your flesh, that's a spiritual thing. That's a heart posture. Die to what you naturally want to do and do the total opposite. So when she answered, it was just like we had a talk and it was a breakthrough, right? So I'm telling you, the enemy is trying to rob you from staying the course, staying hopeful about what God is going to do for you. You might be in a down season with your parents. You might be in a down season with your kids, but stay hopeful. Both parties have to stay hopeful, all right? Another thing I always say, don't stop praying. Just don't stop praying. If you ain't talked to your mama in years, you ain't talked to your daddy in years, don't stop praying. Parents, you can't even get in contact with your kids. Don't stop praying. Because if you stop praying about it, then the relationship is just as good as gone for real then, because you don't even have no power behind it. You ain't even talking to God about it, right? Keep praying about it. Stay steadfast on what you asking God for. And just know, hey, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's a reason they say that. The world wasn't even built in a day. Nothing was built in a day. Nothing happens in one day. And if it happens in one day, it's probably bad. Everything that's worth having, it takes time. Stuff that's worth achieving, it takes time. You got to think about your relationship with your parents like that. All right? Let's heal together. Let's restore these relationships because at this point, man, y'all, we really living in the end times. And I hate for a lot of y'all to get to that day of judgment. And the reason you don't make it in is because you didn't do something as simple as honoring your father and your mother. And I know a lot of y'all say, well, what's the next verse behind it? Parents, don't provoke your children. Listen, man, that is no excuse not to honor. Being provoked, I don't really know how you could be provoked and you staying in somebody else's house. That's your mom and your daddy, but you could be in a worse situation than you in. I'm not talking about people who are dealing with abuse, immorality, or anything like that. I'm talking about a lot of times your children are selfish. A lot of times your children are prideful. And those things grow and they turn into monsters. So all of that, but it say parents don't provoke. Parents don't provoke. Y'all got to learn how to love better too. Y'all got to stop harping on what happened to you when you was a kid and what your mom and daddy did for you. Be your own parent. Be your own woman. Be your own man. You don't have to do the same thing that your parents doing or that your parents did. And y'all kill me when y'all say, well, look at how you turned out a mess. But you think probably because you got a steady job or you married or I don't know what y'all be thinking. But when y'all be saying, my mama did this, my daddy did this, look at how it turned out. You're hurt. You're traumatized. And now you're raising a person with all of that hurt, all that anger, all that trauma. And you think that You're delusional enough to think that you turned out good. So y'all, just to end my podcast, hey, I'm glad y'all was here. I hope y'all got a lot of information. I see y'all back for episode 2. And remember, honor your father and your mother. Honor your father and your mother. God has a promise behind that commandment for a reason. And just remember, go have your opportunity to possibly have kids. Women, you have a womb for a reason. That's the portal to life. Men, you carry the key to creating life. Y'all gotta start honoring before you have kids. And if you already got kids and you ain't got no good relationship with your parents, try to figure it out. Because your kids have to grow. And if you really want to get ahead of the enemy, you wouldn't just leave your family wide open for him to come in and just pick apart. When you don't honor your parents, you open the door for the enemy because you're not obeying God. I see y'all next time.